Imagine holding in your hand a coin that carries the weight of American history, a coin that has witnessed the passing of generations, a coin that marked the very beginning years of one of the most iconic designs in United States coinage we are. Talking about the 1939 Jefferson Nickel, a piece of money that is far more than just 5 cents. It is a gateway into the past, a reflection of art politics and the economy of its time, and a story that blends numismatic beauty with the struggles of a changing nation. To understand the importance of the 1939 Jefferson Nickel, we must go back to its origins and examine why this coin came into being at all. For decades before its arrival, the 5-cent denomination was dominated by the buffalo. Nickel, designed by James Earl Fraser, the buffalo. Nickel, first released in 1913, was beloved for its rugged portrayal of a Native American on the obverse and the American bison on the reverse. Yet as years went on, mint officials began to complain about the practicality of the design. The buffalo nickel was notoriously difficult to strike properly. The details often wore down quickly, and the design presented challenges for long-term coinage use. By the mid-1930s, the United States Mint had already been preparing to replace it, and that is when the call for a new design emerged. The Treasury announced a competition inviting artists to submit their concepts for the new 5-cent coin. The challenge was to honor one of the nation's great leaders. And so the focus turned to Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, third President of the United States and founder of the University of Virginia. His home Monticello would also become part of the design. The winner of the competition was Felix Schlag, a German-born sculptor who immigrated to the United States. His vision was chosen over hundreds of submissions, and the Jefferson Nickel was born in 1938. But the year 1939 was the first full year of wide production, and thus holds a very special place in history. This year was also critical because it marked the first significant adjustments to the design, and these small but important differences would go on to intrigue collectors for generations. The 1939 Jefferson Nickel comes in two primary reverse varieties, one with a reverse of 1938 style and the other with an improved reverse of 1940 style. The difference lies in the lettering and detail on Monticello. In the first version, the letters in Monticello and 5 cents are weak and curved, while in the later variety they were sharpened and strengthened. This seemingly small detail has created one of the most fascinating collectible points for this coin, and it is why 1939 nickels are so heavily studied within numismatics. As we move deeper into the historical context, the world of 1939 was a turbulent one. America was emerging from the Great Depression. Europe was plunging into the beginning stages of World War II, and the role of coinage became more than just commerce. It became a symbol of stability. The Jefferson Nickel was a fresh design meant to bring pride to the American people. Its smooth, clean portrait of Jefferson facing left with Monticello on the back gave the coin a sense of dignity. It was modern yet classical, and it represented ideals of leadership and home. Jefferson was not just any president. He was a philosopher, a scientist, and a farmer. His image on a coin meant that Americans were reminded daily of values tied to liberty, knowledge, and perseverance. The mintage of 1939 nickels was also notable. They were struck at 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each carrying unique mintages and unique stories. The Philadelphia Mint produced the largest numbers, while the San Francisco issues were fewer in quantity, and today they are scarcer in higher grades. Collectors often prize the 1939D and 1939S nickels as tougher finds, especially in uncirculated condition, while Philadelphia issues provide an excellent entry point for collectors studying varieties. One of the most important varieties is the 1939 doubled Monticello and doubled 5 cents variety, a doubled die reverse that shows strong doubling on the inscriptions. This error coin is one of the most famous varieties in the entire Jefferson series and continues to command high prices at auction. The doubled die error happened when the working die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub, creating a dramatic, doubling effect. Such varieties have fascinated collectors for decades because they reveal the very process of how coins are made. Mistakes become treasures, and in this case, the 1939 doubled die reverse is one of the crown jewels of the Jefferson Nickel series. As we analyze the artistry, we must also consider Felix Schlag's role. His original submission actually included a more classical and stylized Monticello with a side view, but Mint officials requested changes to make it more realistic. He also proposed a palm tree design in the background, but this was rejected. The final design we see today was a compromise between his artistic vision and the government's requirements. Schlag himself would not receive great fame during his lifetime, but his work continues to live in every Jefferson Nickel struck since 1938. In terms of condition rarity, the 1939 nickel presents challenges for collectors. While millions were made, few survived in pristine condition due to weak strikes. And circulation, many nickels from this year show soft details, especially on Jefferson's hair and Monticello's steps. Collectors often pursue full steps examples, a designation meaning that all the steps on Monticello are sharply defined such. Coins are incredibly scarce for 1939, and they are highly prized by advanced numismatists. The pursuit of full steps nickels has become a hobby within itself because it requires immense patience and knowledge in searching for well-struck examples. While most coins circulated heavily during the time and wore down quickly, the few that remain untouched in mint state condition shine as historical relics, representing the ideal of perfection in minting beyond the numismatic technicalities. The 1939 Jefferson Nickel also embodies American culture of the late 1930s. It was a time when radio-dominated households, swing music filled dance halls, and cars like the Ford Deluxe roamed the streets. Yet beneath this energy loomed the threat of global war. The Jefferson Nickel circulated in a world of uncertainty, serving as a small but constant reminder of American heritage and leadership. Thomas Jefferson's face symbolized not only money, but also ideals that the United States was striving to uphold. As the 1939 nickel spread through commerce, it touched the lives of millions buying food, paying for transportation exchanged in shops and banks. It was handled by farmers, factory workers, children saving coins in jars, and soldiers. Soon, to be called into service during the coming war, the Jefferson Nickel became a part of daily life. Its durability and wide circulation ensured that nearly every American would encounter it, thus making it a truly national coin. The legacy of the 1939 Jefferson Nickel is vast. It is a coin of firsts, a coin of varieties, a coin of artistry, and a coin of history. It bridges the end of the Buffalo nickel era and the rise of a modern American design. It carries the story of Felix Schlag, his triumph, and compromise. It reflects the nation's journey from depression to wartime economy. It is a small metal disc, yet a powerful symbol of endurance and identity. Collectors today continue to study it, cherish it, and build collections around its varieties. And Mintage's auction houses feature it regularly, and error specialists never tire of analyzing its doubled dies and full-step strikes. The Jefferson Nickel series would continue largely unchanged for decades, making the 1939 issue stand out even more as a key moment in its evolution as you look at the coin. Remember, it is not merely 5 cents. It is a window into the past, a conversation between history and art, and a bridge between generations. That is the story of the 1939 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that deserves respect, fascination, and a permanent place in the chronicles of American numismatics. Imagine holding in your hand a piece of American history that not only represents 5 cents in value, but also carries the weight of a nation's struggles, triumphs, and transformations. The Jefferson Nickel of 1940 is far more than a small coin. Struck in nickel and copper, it is a symbol of an era, a reflection of the United States as it stood on the brink of global conflict, and a continuation of a design that had already begun to carve its place in numismatic history. The story of the 1940 Jefferson Nickel begins with its origins just a year after the first issue in 1938, when the United States Mint replaced the long-running Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. The Buffalo nickel had been admired for its artistry, yet it posed challenges in terms of production and durability. Its intricate details often wore down quickly, and the Mint sought a design that would not only be more practical, but also more enduring. The winning design for the Jefferson Nickel came from Felix Schlag, a German-born American sculptor whose entry triumphed in the 1938 design competition. Schlag's obverse portrait of Jefferson was a bold, left-facing bust, drawing attention to the intellectual strength of the statesman, while the reverse featured a depiction of Monticello, Jefferson's beloved Virginia home, though Schlag's original design underwent modifications imposed by the Commission of Fine Arts and the Mint. The final result was a coin that blended functionality with dignity. The Jefferson Nickel would remain in production with various modifications for decades to come, and in 1940 it was still in its infancy as a series. Now let us focus on the historical backdrop of 1940. America was still recovering from the Great Depression. Franklin D. Roosevelt was leading the nation with his New Deal policies, while at the same time preparing for the possibility of war in Europe, although the United States would not enter World War II until December 1941. The events unfolding overseas were already influencing the American economy industry, and public sentiment coins struck in 1940, including the Jefferson Nickel, reflected a sense of stability, continuity, and readiness for whatever challenges lay ahead. From a technical standpoint, the 1940 Jefferson Nickel was struck in a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The standard alloy used since the coin's introduction, the weight was 5 grams with a diameter of 2 millimeters, and a plain edge production took place at 3 mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each producing millions of nickels. Yet with subtle variations that intrigue collectors to this day, the Philadelphia mint coins carried no mint mark. The Denver issues bore a small D mint mark on the reverse to the right of Monticello, and the San Francisco coins carried an S mint mark in the same position. Mintage figures for 1940 are significant. Philadelphia produced over 176 million nickels. Denver struck around 43 million, and San Francisco added nearly 40 million together. These numbers ensured that the coin circulated widely across the country, becoming a familiar presence in pockets, purses, and cash registers. However, within these large mintages, there exist varieties and conditions that make certain examples far more valuable and desirable than others to collectors. The strike quality varied depending on the mint, with some coins showing sharper details, particularly in Monticello's steps, while others suffered from weaker impressions, making the full step designations a key factor in grading, and value collectors of Jefferson Nickels often focus on the so-called full steps designation, which refers to the clarity of the steps at the base of Monticello on the reverse. A coin that shows 5 or 6 complete steps without breaks or weakness is considered a full steps example. Such coins are scarce for many years of the series, and the 1940 issue is no exception. While millions of nickels were struck, only a fraction display fully defined steps, and those that do are highly sought after by specialists. High-grade, full steps examples can command impressive premiums at auction, especially when certified by reputable grading services. Beyond the technical details, the 1940 Jefferson Nickel holds significance as a coin struck at a crossroads in American history. Collectors often view it as part of the pre-war era, when the design was still new and the nation was still at peace. Within just a few years, the composition of the nickel would change dramatically during World War II, when silver was used in place of nickel to conserve the strategic metal for wartime production. The so-called war nickels issued from 1942 to 1945 stand apart, But the 1940 issue remains a reminder of the last years before that dramatic shift in materials, errors, and varieties of the 1940 Jefferson nickel add another layer of fascination. Among them are double dies, repunched mint marks, and striking anomalies. Some examples show noticeable doubling in the inscriptions or details of Monticello. Others display mint marks that were punched more than once, creating overlapping impressions. These varieties may not be common, but they capture the attention of specialists who scour their collections and rolls of nickels hoping to uncover a hidden rarity. The condition of a 1940 Jefferson nickel plays a crucial role in determining its value circulated. Examples are abundant and usually hold little more than face value unless they exhibit unique characteristics. However, uncirculated coins, especially those with brilliant luster, sharp strikes, and full steps designation, can bring hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on rarity and certification. The grading scale developed by the American Numismatic Association provides a framework for assessing these coins from circulated grades, like good and fine, to mint state levels ranging from MS-60 to MS-67 and beyond. Examples at the highest levels of preservation are exceptionally rare and form the pinnacle of many collections. Over the decades, the Jefferson Nickel series has sometimes been overlooked compared to other American coins such as the Lincoln cent or the Morgan silver dollar. Yet it has gained increasing respect among numismatists for its longevity. Diversity and historical context, the 1940 issue in particular, has a special place because of its timing in history, its role in the development of the series, and its connection to Jefferson's legacy. As we reflect on this coin, we see more than metal. We see craftsmanship, design, symbolism, and history intertwined. The Jefferson Nickel of 1940 speaks to the values of America, the admiration of its leaders, the continuity of its coinage, and the enduring connection between people and the money they use. Each example, whether worn from decades of circulation or preserved in mint state condition, carries with it stories of commerce, survival, and national identity. It is a coin that invites us to look closer, to appreciate the artistry of Felix Schlag, to consider the political climate of the time, and to understand the importance of seemingly ordinary objects in telling the extraordinary story of a nation. So when you hold a 1940 Jefferson nickel in your hand, remember you are not just holding 5 cents. You are holding the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, the creativity of Felix Schlag, the industrial might of the United States Mint, and the resilience of a nation on the verge of historic change. This small coin is a portal into the past, and a reminder of how even the simplest things can carry profound meaning. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of American history, a coin that has survived decades of change, from the aftermath of the Second World War through the Cold War civil rights struggles and modern digital transformations, and yet it remains a silent witness to all of it. This is not just a nickel, it is the Jefferson Nickel of 1946, and it tells a story far greater than its 5-cent face value. Collectors, historians, and everyday Americans may look at this coin as ordinary, but when you dig deep into its design, production, and historical context, you realize this coin represents resilience, transition, and national identity. The Jefferson Nickel had been first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and was designed by sculptor Felix Schlag, who won the design competition. Schlag's portrait of Thomas Jefferson, facing left with a dignified expression, was chosen to symbolize America's third president, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a key architect of democratic ideals. The reverse depicted Jefferson's Monticello estate, with its neoclassical architecture standing as a monument to Jefferson's vision of liberty and enlightenment. Thinking by 1946, the Jefferson Nickel had already endured a crucial change during World War II, when the United States altered the composition of the coin to preserve nickel metal for the war effort from mid-1942 to 1945. Nickels contained an alloy of copper, silver, and manganese, rather than the traditional copper-nickel blend. These were known as war nickels, and they carried a distinctive large mint mark above Monticello to indicate the change. When the war ended in 1945, the United States faced the monumental task of transitioning from wartime production to peacetime industry. Factories that had once built tanks and planes returned to producing consumer goods. Soldiers returned home, and America entered an era of optimism yet uncertainty. The 1946 Jefferson Nickel became the first year in which the coin returned to its original pre-war composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. It was both a return to normalcy and a marker of post-war recovery. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint all struck 1946 nickels, with mintages in the hundreds of millions reflecting a growing economy and the need for circulating coinage to support the post-war boom. The Philadelphia Mint struck the highest mintage at over 161 million pieces. The Denver Mint produced around 45 million, while San Francisco added nearly 14 million, making the S-Mint coins the scarcest of the three in circulation at the time. Collectors today note that while the 1946 nickel is common in lower circulated grades, high-grade uncirculated examples with full steps, details on Monticello are far more elusive. This is due to the quality of striking during the period where weak strikes often plagued Jefferson Nickels. Full steps designations are especially prized by collectors and can command significant premiums. The year 1946 itself adds to the historical weight of this coin. America was emerging as a global superpower. The United Nations had just been founded in 1945, and the United States was leading post-war reconstruction. Under the Marshall Plan domestically, the GI Bill was helping returning veterans pursue education and buy homes. Suburbanization was beginning, and the American economy was shifting toward consumer prosperity. In this context, the Jefferson Nickel circulated in the pockets of citizens buying groceries, paying bus fares, and fueling the everyday lives of Americans who were stepping into a new chapter of national life. From a design perspective, the coin remained unchanged, with Jefferson's profile on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. Yet it carried symbolic importance. Jefferson's legacy as a champion of liberty was highlighted in a time when America was positioning itself as the leader of the free world, in contrast to the growing tensions with the Soviet Union that would soon escalate into the Cold War. The nickel's metallic return from silver wartime alloy to copper-nickel blend also symbolized peace, stability, and economic normalcy. Once again, Americans could handle a nickel that looked and felt like the ones before the war for collectors. The 1946 Jefferson Nickel represents a pivotal transitional issue. It is not rare in the sense of low mintage, but its historical positioning as the first peacetime nickel after the war makes it significant. The San Francisco Mint issues are scarcer and more challenging to find in higher grades, which adds collecting interest, while error varieties, such as repunched mint marks or doubled dies, though not extremely common, do exist and provide specialists with unique challenges and rewards in building sets. To fully appreciate the 1946 nickel, one must also place it in the broader timeline of the Jefferson Nickel series. The early years from 1938 to 1941 saw the introduction and establishment of Schlag's design. Then the war years from 1942 to 1945 introduced the silver alloy nickels, which have always fascinated collectors for their wartime context. Then 1946 marked the return to the classic alloy and symbolized the nation's shift to peacetime. By the late 1940s and into the 1950s, Jefferson Nickels would continue to circulate widely, becoming one of the most familiar and stable denominations in American coinage history, beyond numismatics. The 1946 nickel tells us about the psychology of a nation. Coins are daily objects handled by millions, yet they capture the mood of their time. In 1946, the nation was filled with optimism and rebuilding energy. The soldiers were back industries, were booming, and coins like the Jefferson nickel were the currency of this prosperity, each one circulated in countless hands, buying newspapers, ice cream sodas, streetcar tickets, and small luxuries that symbolized the return of peace. In the decades since the 1946 nickel has become a staple of collections, especially for those building complete Jefferson nickel sets from 1938 onward, its value in circulated condition remains modest, but in uncirculated condition with sharp details and lustrous surfaces, it can fetch strong prices. Registry set collectors especially seek out coins with full steps designations, as these demonstrate the pinnacle of quality and strike precision from an era when such coins were not easy to produce. When you look closely at a 1946 Jefferson nickel, you see more than metal. You see the transition from war to peace, from scarcity to abundance, from uncertainty to optimism. You see the image of Thomas Jefferson, whose ideals continued to inspire a post-war America charting its destiny on the world stage. You see Monticello standing firm like the Republic itself, resilient after global conflict, and you see the craftsmanship of the United States Mint, resuming traditional practices after years of extraordinary wartime measures. This coin, therefore, is not merely a 5-cent piece. It is a bridge in American history, a marker of return, a symbol of stability, and a tangible reminder of 1946, a year when the world was being reshaped and the United States was stepping into a new role on the global stage. It continues to fascinate collectors, historians, and storytellers alike, making it one of the most interesting issues in the Jefferson Nickel series. Step back in time with me to the year 1947. When the world was recovering from the aftermath of the Second World War, a time of transition when America was shifting from wartime production to peacetime prosperity, and among the countless symbols of American resilience and stability was a small 5-cent coin. The Jefferson nickel and the 1947 issue of this coin carries a story far greater than its size. It represents continuity change and the enduring legacy of American coinage. The Jefferson Nickel series began in 1938 when it replaced the Buffalo nickel, and its design by sculptor Felix Schlag showcased Thomas Jefferson on the obverse with Monticello, his Virginia home, on the reverse by 1947. The design was already well established in the pockets of everyday Americans, yet each year tells its own unique story, and the 1947 issue is no exception. To understand the 1947 Jefferson nickel, we must first look at the climate of the United States at the time. Factories that once produced tanks, planes, and ammunition were now producing consumer goods, cars, refrigerators, and televisions. The war had left its mark, but Americans were eager to move forward, and coins were part of that movement in daily life. By 1947, the wartime alloy changes of the Jefferson nickel had ended during World War II. From 1942 to 1945, the composition of the nickel had been altered to save nickel metal for the war effort, with silver, manganese, and copper being used instead. But beginning in 1946, the mint returned to the traditional composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This makes the 1947 nickel part of the first full post-war issues struck entirely in the original metal blend, again, a symbol of returning normalcy and stability. The minting of the 1947 Jefferson nickel took place at 3 locations: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint, each producing millions of coins, yet with slight variations and different mint marks that today carry weight. In the eyes of collectors, the Philadelphia Mint produced the largest share, and like all Philadelphia coins of the time, it bore no mint mark. The Denver Mint coins featured a small D mint mark located on the reverse to the right of Monticello, and the San Francisco Mint struck its share with an S mint mark. Each of these varieties holds its own appeal to numismatists. When examining the design itself, the obverse portrait of Thomas Jefferson in profile still maintained the crisp sculptural lines envisioned by Schlag, although dye wear and striking pressure at times led to weakness in detail, especially in Jefferson's hair and cheekbone areas. The reverse with Monticello often suffered from weakness in the steps of the building, which would later give rise to the famous full steps designation among collectors. A coin with fully struck steps is considered far more desirable and valuable, and 1947 is no exception in that regard. Condition rarity is a central part of the story, with many coins from 1947 surviving in circulated grades, but relatively fewer in pristine mint-state condition, free of bag marks, scratches, or dull luster in the realm of coin grading, where experts assess coins on a scale from 1 to 70, the finest. Examples of 1947 nickels command strong interest, especially when they display that coveted full steps detail. Collectors and historians also view the 1947 nickel as part of a transitional period in U.S. coinage. It is not tied to the wartime silver, nickels, nor is it yet part of any design change. It exists in that post-war calm, a coin that quietly circulated through the hands of Americans during the early days of the baby boom, the dawn of the Cold War, and the rise of post-war prosperity. If you were to hold a 1947 nickel, you would be touching a piece of a time when a gallon of gas was just a few cents, when a loaf of bread was inexpensive, and when families were beginning to dream of suburban homes with white picket fences. While the mintages of 1947 nickels were high enough to meet circulation demand, the coin in high grade is where true rarity lies. Philadelphia struck over 100 million coins. Denver and San Francisco each produced tens of millions, yet most of those coins endured years of use pocketware and banking circulation, which makes uncirculated survivors particularly appealing. Professional grading services such as PCGS and NGC have encapsulated and certified many of these nickels, giving modern collectors a way to assess authenticity and condition reliably. As with many Jefferson nickels, the 1947 issue is also studied for its die varieties, repunched mint marks, doubled dies, and striking anomalies. Specialists in the series often devote entire catalogs to documenting these subtle variations, which add layers of complexity and intrigue to the hobby. For example, repunched mint marks from the Denver and San Francisco issues show the hand craftsmanship of placing mint marks into dies, a process that would later become mechanized, adding charm to the imperfections of the era. It is also worth considering the cultural resonance of Jefferson himself. By 1947, Jefferson represented not just a founding father, but also the embodiment of American ideals, of democracy, expansion, and intellectual curiosity. Placing his portrait on the 5-cent coin ensured his image circulated daily in millions of transactions from grocery stores to movie theaters, reinforcing his legacy for every American citizen. Monticello on the reverse further underscored his vision and his deep connection to Virginia heritage. For those building collections today, the 1947 nickel can be approached in several ways. One might seek a simple representative circulated example to tell the story of post-war coinage, or one might aim higher, assembling a full mint mark set in mint state condition with sharp details, or even focus on finding the elusive full steps examples that command premium values at auction records. Reveal that top-graded specimens with full steps can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on their rarity and eye appeal, far above their humble face value of 5 cents. This long history and numismatic depth is what transforms the 1947 Jefferson nickel from a small everyday coin into a window of the past. It is not just copper and nickel alloy, it is a storyteller of post-war America, a witness to change, and a collector treasure waiting to be discovered. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that was born in the aftermath of World War II. A coin that reflects not only the economic recovery of the United States, but also the enduring legacy of one of its most important founding fathers, the 1948 Jefferson. Nickel is more than just a small piece of metal. It is a window into American history, design artistry, and the progress of the minting process in the mid-20th century. When we begin the journey of understanding the 1948 Jefferson nickel, must first travel back to its origins. The Jefferson nickel was first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and it carried with it a new image of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States on the obverse, and Jefferson's Monticello home on the reverse, sculpted by Felix Schlag. The design was intended to reflect both the ideals of democracy and the architectural beauty that Jefferson so passionately loved. By 1948, the Jefferson Nickel had already been in circulation for a decade, but this particular year holds unique importance in the broader context of numismatics and American history. To understand the significance of the 1948 Jefferson Nickel, we must examine the political and economic climate of the late 1940s. The United States was transitioning from wartime production to a booming post-war economy. The coinage system reflected stability as the country entered into a new era of prosperity and expansion. The nickel itself was made of its traditional copper-nickel alloy composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Unlike the wartime nickels of 1942 to 1945 that contained silver, the return to the copper-nickel alloy signaled normalcy after years of global conflict. For collectors and historians, the 1948 issue represents that shift back to peace and consistency. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all responsible for producing Jefferson Nickels in 1948, and each mint mark tells its own story. Philadelphia coins bore no mint mark. Denver coins bore a small D, and San Francisco coins bore an S mint mark, found to the right of Monticello on the reverse. The mintage numbers were substantial, with the Philadelphia Mint producing over 89 million nickels, the Denver Mint producing nearly 45 million, and the San Francisco Mint striking about 11 million. While these numbers suggest that the 1948 nickel is not particularly rare in terms of overall survival, condition rarity tells a different tale, finding high-grade examples with sharp details. Full steps on Monticello and pristine luster is a true challenge, and it is these finer points that drive collector interest. The artistry of the Jefferson Nickel deserves deeper attention. Felix Schlag's original design was modified slightly over time, with Monticello's details often appearing weak or flat on circulation strikes. Collectors of Jefferson Nickels often focus on the full steps designation, a grading detail that indicates the steps leading up to Monticello are fully visible without wear or flattening. In 1948, this becomes especially important because production quality at the mints, varied coins from Philadelphia often exhibit softer strikes compared to Denver issues, while San Francisco pieces frequently show weaker details, making high-quality San Francisco coins particularly desirable among specialists. The story of the 1948 Jefferson Nickel also cannot be separated from the cultural landscape of America. During that year, 1948, was a time of political contest, as President Harry S. Truman won a surprising re-election. The Cold War was beginning to shape international relations. The Marshall Plan was actively rebuilding Europe, and domestically the United States was solidifying its identity as a post-war power. Against this backdrop, ordinary Americans carried 1948 nickels in their pockets, using them in everyday transactions at grocery stores, gas stations, diners, and movie theaters. The nickel became a silent companion to the daily lives of millions, embodying both Jefferson's vision and America's forward momentum. Condition rarity and grading standards make up another chapter in this coin's long history. Collectors today prize examples of the 1948 nickel in mint state condition. Those certified by professional grading services like PCGS and NGC often command premiums, especially when designated with full steps. A top-quality 1948 Jefferson Nickel with full steps can transform an otherwise common date into a true prize within a registry set. In fact, registry set competition has elevated the status of even seemingly ordinary dates like 1948, as collectors seek perfection in every slot of their Jefferson Nickel collections. Errors and varieties add another fascinating dimension. The 1948 Jefferson Nickel is known for several die variations and minting anomalies, including repunched mint marks, doubled dies, and strike-through errors. Though not as dramatic as some other dates, these varieties capture the attention of advanced collectors, each one a reminder of the imperfections of the minting process and the human element behind machine-struck coinage. Studying these varieties gives us a glimpse into the technical side of mint production in the late 1940s, where dies wore out or were hand-punched with mint marks, creating subtle differences that have become treasures for specialists today. From a historical standpoint, the Jefferson Nickel also reflects Jefferson's legacy as a thinker and statesman. Jefferson was not just a president, he was an author of the Declaration of Independence, a founder of the University of Virginia, an advocate for liberty and learning. His portrait on the coin is not just decorative. It is symbolic of the ideals of freedom, democracy, and architecture as an art of civilization. Monticello itself stands as a monument to Jefferson's intellect and vision, and in 1948, every coin that bore his home reminded Americans of that enduring legacy. For 2 full hours, one could explore the many branches of this coin's story, from minting techniques to historical parallels, from collector markets to cultural meaning. The 1948 Jefferson Nickel is more than a simple piece of currency. It is a bridge between past and present, a tangible artifact of post-war America, and a continuing subject of fascination for numismatists around the world, whether tucked away in a collection certified in a holder or still occasionally found in circulation. The coin carries with it 75 years of history, artistry, and the enduring image of a man who helped shape a nation. Imagine holding in your hand a small 5-cent piece that looks ordinary to many, but for those who truly know coins, the Jefferson Nickel of 1952 is far from just another pocket change item. It is a piece of American history that carries the weight of an era shaped by post-war recovery, political change, and economic growth. And in this journey, we will uncover the full story of the 1952 Jefferson Nickel, from its design origins to the history of the minting process, to the role it played in commerce, to the varieties and mint marks that make it highly collectible, and we will dive deep into its significance to collectors, historians, and everyday Americans who used this coin in their daily lives, because behind the shine of every nickel lies the story of a nation in motion. The Jefferson Nickel itself began its life in 1938, when the United States Mint sought to replace the Buffalo nickel that had been circulating since 1913. The winning design came from Felix Schlag, a German-born American sculptor whose vision of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse became iconic over the years. This design endured through World War II, when nickels temporarily shed their nickel content and were struck in an alloy of silver, manganese, and copper to save the critical metal for the war effort by 1946. However, the wartime alloys were retired, and the nickel returned to its traditional 75% copper and 25% nickel composition. And it was in this post-war world that the 1952 Jefferson Nickel was struck, a time when America was asserting its global leadership and domestic life was expanding with suburban growth, consumer goods, and the optimism of the baby boom. The 1952 Jefferson Nickel was struck at 3 mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint produced the largest quantity with no mint mark, while Denver used the D mint mark and San Francisco the S mint mark. This would actually be one of the last years for San Francisco Jefferson Nickels, as the mint stopped producing them in 1954, making those San Francisco nickels from the early 50s particularly notable in the long series of Jefferson Nickels. Each mint location tells its own story of production, quality, die preparation, and striking details. Collectors today examine these variations to better understand the minting process and to assess rarity and value. On the obverse side, Jefferson's portrait remained largely unchanged from the original Schlag design, though the mint made adjustments over the years to improve clarity and striking sharpness in 1952. The coins were still known for having soft strikes, especially on the steps of Monticello, which became an important detail for collectors. The full-step designation indicates sharpness in the reverse strike, and full-step examples of 1952 nickels, especially from certain mints, are considered significantly more desirable and valuable than typical circulated examples. The 1952 nickel was part of everyday circulation at a time when a nickel had meaningful buying power. It could purchase a candy bar, a soda, or pay part of a bus fare, and these coins passed through countless hands in a decade when the Cold War was intensifying. Dwight D. Eisenhower had just been elected president, and the Korean War was coming to an end. American families were buying their first televisions, cars, and homes, and through all of this, the Jefferson nickel remained a familiar constant, a coin that was not flashy, but stable and trustworthy, just as Jefferson himself symbolized stability and intellectual grounding in the nation's identity. For collectors, the 1952 Jefferson nickel presents several points of interest. Circulation strikes are plentiful, but finding them in higher mint state grades with sharp details is challenging. The San Francisco issues are lower in mintage compared to Philadelphia and Denver, and thus more prized proof coins were also produced in Philadelphia, and these 1952 proofs are a fascinating study in their own right. The quality of the strike, the mirror finish, and the careful handling of proof sets makes them distinct in the eyes of numismatists. Errors and varieties also play a role in the 1952 Jefferson nickel. Story collectors have noted repunched mint marks, doubled dies, and other striking anomalies that increase value and spark excitement. When discovered, these varieties highlight the fact that minting is both a technological and human process, where imperfections create unexpected treasures. The legacy of the 1952 Jefferson nickel is not only about rarity or monetary worth, but about its place in a larger narrative. It represents a period when America was transitioning from war into peace, when coins were still primarily about function, but slowly becoming objects of collecting passion. It is a coin that links us to Thomas Jefferson, the statesman, the philosopher, the author of the Declaration of Independence, while also tying us to mid-20th century America, a land of optimism, growth, and change. When you look closely at a 1952 Jefferson nickel, you are not just seeing a 5-cent piece. You are holding a story of artistry, history, economy, and culture. It is a window into an era that can be explored for hours, from the story of Felix Schlag and his design, to the evolution of minting practices, to the world of coin collectors who prize these coins for their beauty and history. The 1952 nickel stands as both artifact and legacy. So if you want to understand why this coin matters, if you want to know why collectors spend lifetimes searching for the perfect example, if you want to see how a simple piece of change can tell the story of an entire nation, then the 1952 Jefferson nickel is your guide, a coin that in its small size holds the weight of history and the promise of a deeper connection to the American past.